desegregate baseball. In 48, President Truman desegregated the military. So, right, is that right?
Yeah, actually Truman did not appoint Happy Chandler, and he had nothing to do with that. What happened is that Chandler was voted upon by the owners, and the person that really greased the skids for him was Larry McPhail. He was Chandler's sponsor in a way, and of course later on Larry McPhail regretted it. Big time.
They all regretted it.
Yes, they did.
Just about. A lot of them did.
And again, in Branch Rickey's papers are some notes about Happy Chandler's elections, and I basically covered that in terms of how he got elected, and it was a major surprise to find that in Branch Rickey's papers, because usually they keep that. That's a big secret.
And his, it was an interesting story about how he got elected. I don't think anybody really expected him to get the job, but it was the owners who had that ability. It was a wholly owned thing by the owners, and they made the choice, which was why they felt like they ought to have somebody who would do their bidding. They made the choice, and they paid the salary. And it was not an insubstantial salary at the time. In fact, that's probably why he took the job.
$50,000.
At a time when a U.S. senator was making $10,000.
And a school teacher was lucky to make $5,000.
So it was a lot of money at the time, and they felt like they should have had owners who, they should have had a commissioner who did what the owners who paid him wanted him to do. Well, now, I think it goes without saying, and the record will support the notion that he was independent and that he did not do what the owners wanted him to do all the time, by any means. And that independence, I believe, probably cost him as much as anything. Based on that Yawkey quote, the Yawkey quote says a lot. And then also by who followed him in the commissioner's office. He was followed by a fellow named Ford Frick.
Who?
Yeah. And Ford Frick, I think my grandfather was there for about 6 years, something along those lines. His contract was 7, but he left a little early, didn't he?
He did, but he almost made 7.
Did he almost make 7? All right. Ford Frick was there for 14 years. And in all those 14 years, I think what he was known most for was putting an asterisk next to Roger Maris's name. That's just not a great lot of achievement. And he was known. And when my grandfather was asked after Frick had been chosen to replace him, my grandfather's quote was, "Baseball had a vacancy and they decided to keep it."
Whenever Ford Frick was asked a question he didn't want to answer, he would just simply say, "I'm sorry, but that's a league matter."
Yeah. And Frick's history goes back to the 20s. He was a sports writer, and he was a guy who was a ghostwriter for a lot of the stars, and he was a he was a great yes man to Landis. So he was their guy. It would have made more sense to the owners to have Frick than somebody with a little bit upstairs like Chandler.
He helped make Babe Ruth, though. He was Babe Ruth's ghostwriter.
Right. And then he preserved that by putting the asterisk with Roger Maris.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You all made a great point of what a pivotal decision it was. What does it say now about baseball that you're seeing a reduction in the number of African American players that play the game? Is that
Well, in the World Series, it was one black on both teams. The first, and that hasn't, and there hasn't been that few since '47. I don't see us turning this around. I mean, there are programs, the RBI program, where baseball's trying to bring back baseball to the inner cities. I think that may work a little bit, but I think it's turned, and I'm not sure it's coming back. I mean, right now the minority. I mean, there are 27% of Major League Baseballers, of all players, are Latinos now, and the minor leagues it's 35%.
That's where the real growth is,
right?
Latinos.
And I think baseball, may give it lip service, but it's now 8.5%, something like that, of blacks. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I don't think it's going to come back for a while, especially when you have African Americans. You know, the two professional sports they look at are basketball and football. And I think another problem that we have is with baseball is, you know, equipment and places to play. I mean, with basketball, you just need pavement and a couple of baskets and a ball to play, and you can play all the time. And it's the other problem we have with baseball is now it's so organized. You know, all of us that have gray hair can tell you how we played every day with kids in the neighborhood.
The Sandlot.
Right. Sandlots.
No,
And
Sandlot.
We made our own
baseball,
rules.
it's changed.
Now it's travel ball. I mean, think what you're losing are not just blacks. You're losing middle class whites because of travel ball, and I just don't see. I think baseball needs to do something because my son is 12, and there might be one other kid in his class who considers baseball his favorite sport.
They'll also play soccer.
Yeah.
That's another sport that's taken away.
Yes, sir.
You can't play it unless you're on a traveling team, though, really.
Right, and that's money.
Yeah.
Good question here.
Small three. Can you comment a little bit on sports being a great social equalizer? Bill, you might know, or Chris, you might know a little bit more about this than I do. Wasn't baseball a great outlet for first Irish ball players and Italian and Polish ball players? And I think, you know, for society as a whole, when teams have different ethnic makeups, it's very difficult to root for an Italian ball player like Joe DiMaggio and leave the stadium and call people what they used to call wops. Can you comment on that?
Sure. And it goes back to what we were just mentioning. I think we're still going through that, and I think we're doing it with Latino or Hispanic ball players. And they're, you know, if you see, you know, most of the Hispanic ball players are fabulous, but we have one or two that in this past season who have done some things that we would consider questionable, and you know, they're just young ball players. But when you look at those ball players, there was an article that came out and saying, well, we need to let them do that. We need to let them show off and do that kind of stuff. And it was something that caused me some concern when I saw that. But it is I think, evidence of the growing influence that the Hispanic population has on our country. And I think, you know, in another fashion, that we're going to have to, you know, absorb and take and look at that. And I don't think it's quite the same as it was when you had, you know, Stan Musial, who was basically second generation Polish. You know, Joe DiMaggio was the same thing. Yeah. And you don't realize, you know, that Ted Williams, his dad was Irish, but his mother was French and Mexican. And I mean, they're just, and Lou Gehrig wasn't that far away, so you have German. I mean, you're right, it happened over and over again, and I think it's happening again today in a slightly different way.
Well, yeah, I think that, I mean, if you go through sports, one of the things in writing this book I found is that through decades, if not generations, a white America, we did not know about black teachers, we did not know about black doctors, we did not know about black engineers, we knew about black athletes. And sports writers knew that blacks were the equal of whites and whites were the equals of blacks in sports and didn't report it. And there were and an awful lot of white America had seen black players, whether they would come to the town or they would play in major league ballparks or what have you. And that's why it's one of the reasons why there was integration in sports, and we also saw it in the Olympics. We saw it with Joe Louis. We saw it with Jesse Owens. We did see blacks, and Jackie Robinson had been an All-American football player. So we did see blacks excelling in sports. And that goes back to your point, we didn't see blacks excelling in really anything else with the possible exception of music and arts.
Okay, one more question, Russ.
I think back to Pee Wee Reese and his role with introducing Jackie Robinson as a person and a baseball player. I wonder how many other of those teammates, Dodgers, had served in the Army or in the Navy or had been in that position. Because I always think that service to our country is a great equalizer. And that's something that I want to say to you, because right now you're Reese and me, that he experienced and he knew and he took that with him. Probably he had a pretty good raising up to, you know. But I thought about that, and there would be a man in time that would step forward and say, this is my friend, regardless of skin or race or whatever. But it fell to Embry Reese, and I just think of that, being placed in the right place at that time. And it's a thank you to him, and then like that have brought so much more to our sports and to our world.
I think, I just say that what I found out in researching Pee Wee was that he was no crusader for a cause except for baseball. And he believed people deserved an even chance to show what they could do. And I think it was very difficult from him. As a matter of fact, Pee Wee's upbringing was extreme in ways that have to do with racial stereotypical attitudes. He recounted a story where his father took him at one point in time in Brandenburg, Kentucky, and said, this is the tree where we hanged the last black person that was around. You know, it's this kind of upbringing. Pee Wee was a person who believed people should be judged on their merits, and I think he always stuck to that. But he did not want to start some movement necessarily, at least the things I saw about him, he didn't. But thank you for your nice comments, too.
Well, regrettably, you want to make
Can
a comment?
Can I just add on that? If with your permission, here's another quotation of Pee Wee Reese. He said, you know, my first feelings about Robinson were that, after all, maybe he's just as good as I am. Now, after meeting him and seeing what a wonderful guy he is, I've reached the conclusion that maybe he's a better man than I am. So.
He was honest, very honest.
Well, regrettably, we've run out of time. I want to thank you for being here, and I want a nice round of applause for Mr. Usher and our panelists. Thank you.